I think the process is a more inclusive name, and Tai Chi is only one of many approaches that deserve recognition, deserve acknowledgement. And the ordinary integration of being self-aware during the day is what we're trying to point towards. And a commonplace, the Tai Chi is very eclectic and very specialized and does require a lot of special time. It is not going to be something that everyone will have access to, but everyone does have access to their own body when they move out of a dream state into the waking state. And when you realize that we're inhabiting our bodies in the same way as we're inhabiting the planet, then we'll be on the process and we'll be moving towards the goals of self-recognition that we're hoping that evolved mankind has always hoped to achieve.
And some of the ways, some of the processes that you have used have included your drawing.
Right, I've used the mandala work, and it's a very key point.
And what work?
Working with mandalas.
Oh, mandalas, okay.
It was very key for me. It was a key for me because it was a way of bridging between the nameless to the names. There's a whole reservoir of nameless areas in our consciousness that, not nameless in the sense that they haven't been named yet, but nameless in the sense that they'll never be named. There are some areas in consciousness that are pre-verbal, in which words and the word ordering process haven't even been engaged into the nervous system yet.
Earlier, we have Tim Brent's Tai Chi master with us in the studio for the first of a somewhat continuing series, not only on Tai Chi, but other movement therapies or movement exercises or philosophizing about life or a whole lot of things. And we want to welcome John Cooke to our studio. And John, just for a beginning, why don't you tell us something about your background?
Well, thank you. I teach the Tai Chi in Bowling Green, Ohio, in the Attention City movement, as you mentioned, and I did my undergraduate work at Bowling Green and also was a graduate of the Tai Chi Health Academy out of Toledo, and my Tai Chi master and instructor was Hoksum Wu from Sao Paulo, Brazil, and Shanghai before that. And I studied with him for a number of years, and he now lives in California and has his program there. He's the sixth generation of Tai Chi masters in the family that I come from, Tai Chi family that I come from. I became interested in movement out of a spontaneous occurrence that happened when I was 8. I was out hunting butterflies. At that time, hunting butterflies and insect collecting was a part of the curriculum of the school that I went to in Troy, Ohio. And I was helping my brothers and sisters make their collection. They were sophomores in high school. And as I said, I was 8. And I was up hunting butterflies, and I had this large butterfly net, and we were catching black swallowtails. And it was a beautiful spring day with that speckly light that the small leaves of the trees allow through on the floor of the forest. And as I was swinging at these butterflies with my net, I was going in these figure-8 motions and these circular motions, which are the basic movements in all Kung Fu movements. It's the circular and figure-8 motion. I was making these circular motions with my net like this, chasing these butterflies and watching them very effectively. And through no known reason of my own, I popped into a very desirable altered state of consciousness in which everything became silent around me and everything took on a very golden hue and haze, and I moved into a timeless spot. And when I moved into this timeless spot, my body movements became much nor adapt. I became very clear and precise in my motion, and I felt a great sense of competency come over me. And I thought to myself, many thoughts poured into my mind, and feelings about what it was to be human and what it was to be a person. And I began to sense a powerful, unknown quality that was available to all people. And I began to sense that people had something within them that already had competency without training. There was some kind of bodily knowledge inside them that could bring about jumps in performance that were outside of any kind of experience. I thought to myself, well, who is this 8-year-old person moving with such competency and such clarity? And my brothers and sisters were over 15 feet away from me, and I thought another thought that came to me was like, aha, they can't tell. I live a personal life. I live a first-person life. I live a life that only I can tell about. And this experience, like, I didn't say anything to them, but this experience was the beginning of a series of experiences that I had over the years, up until I was in college.
Let me interrupt you. When you said, aha, this is a first-person life, was that a good feeling? Or was it an isolated feeling?
No, it was a very good feeling because it came along with us. One of the advantages of working on the floor is it frees up all the parts of our nervous system, the energy of our nervous system that goes towards keeping our balance, keeping us upright. Some estimates say that about 70% of our nervous system is used at any given moment when we're standing to keep ourselves balanced, just keep ourselves erect. So when we're working on the floor and taking advantage of the floor, we have the opportunity to experience a greater sense of openness, free from the restrictions of gravity and the danger of falling. When beginning a floor session, like in other sessions we've talked about, and other exercises we've done, I recommend to divide the body down the middle and compare right and left sides. So I'd like, if you would like to do an exercise along like this, now let's move some furniture out of the way, and so that you have a clear view of the television set, and lay down on your back. The very first step in any floor work is to allow first the floor to hold you up, the obvious. Let the floor hold you up. Try to eliminate as much unnecessary muscular activity as possible. Divide the body down, right side and left side. Comparing the way the body lays against the floor. Is it symmetrical? Is one side up a little higher than the other? Ask yourselves questions and ways of discriminating between the two sides. Is the difference between the Achilles tendon and the floor different on both sides? Is it the same on both sides, or is one different? Does the toe go off at a different angle on one side than the other? Are the knees placed at a different angle, or does the back of the knee touch on one side and not the other? Can you find something to let go of in the legs that allows a little bit freer access? And let the floor do much of the work. Now come up into the small of the back and the way the hips lay. How much space is between the small of the back and the floor? Can you stick your whole hand between the small of the back and the floor if you reach under? Can you stick your hand sideways, or a few fingers sideways underneath? Now come up to the shoulders. Compare the way the weight is between the right shoulder and the left shoulder on the floor. Compare the height of the shoulder off. Is one different than the other? Does one appear to be farther from the right ear? Does the left shoulder appear to be farther from the left ear than the right side? Now think of the nape of the neck for a second. How many fingers can you stick under the nape of the neck? 2, 3, 4, 1. If you're wondering, usually 2 fingers is an appropriate number of fingers to go under the nape of the neck. Many people, though, can get 3 and 4 fingers underneath the neck. Does the head appear to be laying tilted back and thrown up? Ask yourself these questions and then close your eyes and compare the way the sides feel. Does your right leg seem the same length as the left leg? Does your right arm appear to be, to your perception, the same length as the left arm? Does your right shoulder seem to stick out from the midline of your body the same as from the right side, left side? Notice if your nose likes to rest straight up, or does it lean to one side? Notice the tip of your tongue. Does it like to slide to one side? Does it feel comfortable? Compare the right and left. And once you've got a good picture in your mind of the rights and lefts, knowing though no doubt this is fresh to you and it won't be very clear exactly what you're thinking about and what you're trying to compare, feel free to make mistakes and make your best stab at what we're doing. Now I'd like to have you, we're going to do what I call leg tapping, knee tapping. I'd like to have you raise the knees off the ground a few inches and let them come down to the floor. And do this simultaneously on both sides. And maybe to a count of 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then rest it. 1, 2, 3, 4. And rest it. 1, 2, 3, 4. And rest it. Now just rest for a second. Notice how your legs feel now. Do they feel different than they felt a minute ago? Do they feel more complete? Is their image clear in your mind? Has there been a change in your hips? Has there been a change in the small of your back? What is happening in your physical frame? The rest of this exercise will be centered around shifting your attention around doing that same activity. We're going to continue to lift the knees. We're going to put our attention in different places. And we're going to see what that does to that small and simple activity. Let's begin by thinking of our legs as being lifted, or our knees as being lifted from strings off the top of the knee. So lift from the top of the knee. And then while you're doing this, I want you to notice what's happening down in the heels. Lifting from the top of the knee. Notice the pivoting of the heel. And how the angle of the Achilles tendon to the floor is changing slightly as it pivots on the heel. Now I'd like to have you duplicate the same activity, but now I want you to concentrate on that pivoting of that fulcrum at the heel. As if the whole purpose now is not to lift the knee, even though that's what you're going to do, but the whole purpose is to change the angle of the Achilles tendon and pivot on the heel. Is there something different now about this activity? Once you put your attention on the heel and no longer in the knee. Go back to the knee and see if you can tell the difference. And now back to the ankle. And back to the knee. Now think about the upper leg. What's it doing? Notice, of course, that you're pivoting at the hips. And the upper leg is changing its angle to the floor. So let's make the whole purpose just to change the angle of the upper leg. Do you feel something different in the abdomen area? Do you feel, even though you're lifting the knees like always, now you're using a different set of muscles? And now shift back down to the ankles, and then to the knees, and then back up to the thigh again. And play with the novelty of duplicating this lift from these three different intentions. And rest. That's a vital example of how the floor works and how you work. So when you use your intention, or you concentrate on acting out of a certain part of yourself, that changes the muscle organization. Even though the activity from the outside might appear to be exactly the same.
Well, you know, my guess is 99% of the people out there may really not know what in the world is going on with this Tai Chi. I think the only reason I have is knowing Tim as long as I have and hearing all the different times he responds in all the different ways. It seems to me that you say it's a tool, but I guess it's what it's a tool for, that many people don't know to miss that. They don't have that longing because they haven't tasted it. They don't even know that what it can bring is possible. Do you kind of hear?
Yeah, I'm hearing I guess they oftentimes wonder where this would fit and how practical is this and how does this fit into their life. What kind of questions does it answer? What kind? I mean, everything.
But it helped them lose weight.
Right. Well, it helped. Yeah. Right. Well, what does it have that? What does it really have to offer them? And I'm not. Well, I guess, and to me, Tai Chi is a very ordinary thing. It's a very ordinary thing. It's just about getting up and getting down, about using your eyes, about opening and closing, about extending and withdrawing.
But I think that maybe someone who goes into it doesn't start out inner-directed, but it would seem that you would end up inner-directed.
Well, very few start out for the right reasons.
Oh, really? So there's hope for all
In my
everyone.
opinion, most people who start out for Tai Chi, start out doing Tai Chi, are starting out for, well, idiocratic reasons. They start out for eclectic reasons. They start out for reasons that it seems artsy, it seems special, it seems different. It'll give them some character. It'll fill in a void in their life. It'll give them a pastime. Those are all legitimate things, but those aren't the things that it ends up with, because if you allow it to, it begins to change you. And I'm not saying, to me, Tai Chi is a very ordinary thing, but once it gets, it's like the old tar baby story is like once that tar gets on you, well, you know, pretty soon you got some more on you. And that isn't the general gist of that story, but that's what happens to tar. You get a little bit on you, pretty soon you get a lot on you. There's like this old phrase that you find on the street is that you can't work with it without getting some of it on you. And that's what Tai Chi does. It begins to change you. And I always say that a person never continues Tai Chi for the same reason he began.
Oh.
Because new things come up. You know. What do you think, Tim? When you started out, you know, you had a vague idea what it was. You were doing this. You were an athlete, and you were like a kind of guy who was trying to get involved in some spiritual things or whatever. And it turned out to be a lot more kind of hard at it. Didn't have much spiritual fluff to it. There wasn't like a whole lot of like dewy-eyed mysticism about it. This was pretty much about not being able to do something and then learn how to do it.
But he ended up more spiritual, I believe.
Well, that could be. It's only he would know. But it's like it's a thing you grab a hold of, and it grabs a hold of you in return.
It kind of seems like it's as simple as like be here now, and how powerful that can be. It has you right in the present and experiencing, and that is really powerful.
Well, I think that when the closer you're right, I think that's certainly the present is welling up constantly, and it's the thing that most of life is centered around avoiding. And it, by its very nature, civilization is centered around probably to take the edge off the present as much as possible. You know, I think that I think that's one of those kinds of things that it just has arisen over time, and now it's not even mentioned that much anymore. Probably, I don't know. You know, I don't know what the general dialogue about civilization is at the present moment. But I think
things are going to the devil in a handbasket, I guess.
Well, it always has been. It's just that it's doing it faster now, maybe, and I think there is some kind of possibly some credence for that. And maybe Tai Chi is helping for it to go that way. Who knows? I certainly wouldn't say that it wasn't helping. I'm not sure how things work. But Tai Chi, for some people, or a Tai Chi type activity, a Kung Fu activity where you're paying attention to detail. You're paying attention to actually what happens to you. Not only paying attention as an observer, but paying attention as a participant, where you really feel what's happening in the space that you're living.
Well, that's very much the opposite of the proverbial, you know, drinking beer and sitting in front of the TV, you know, all weekend, that some people get into, a non-feeling, spacing out, blah kind of deadened existence. Sounds like it's the opposite, where you are sensitive and aware and searching and listening. And
well, I think you're right, but I think at the same time that something has to be said in defense of spacing out and watching television and all the other abusive behaviors that our society goes for and does manically. I think there's a strong compulsion in us as people to there's a strong calling us to rebel against what's happening around us. And sometimes we do this in inappropriate ways. Sometimes we do this by deadening ourselves. Sometimes these are statements about like what we think that life is offering us. And it's a foolish way of doing things.
because nobody notices and hears that.
Well, that's true. But at the same time, it also forms a boundary. We talked earlier about containment. There's something about, it's like the word fix. I mentioned that earlier briefly. The word fix is an interesting word. And the word fix refers to like the fix of a drug addict. It also refers to a location in space. It also refers to like the idea of a place on a map, a place in time, a place that's anchored. So like many things about, there's odd things that are going on when people try to like contain something and they don't have the means to contain something. And sometimes people go into oblivion to get a look at something that appears to be isolated from that which is around them. So there's a, it's coming from other rooms. About that morning exercise program, and I thought I'd run through it real quick for you here. And the good thing about it is it's on the bed. I mean, I don't even get out of bed hardly. I roll up onto the surface and I lay down. I switch from being this way, obviously, to this way, and take advantage of the fact that it's half awake. And I start out with using my foot circles and whatnot. Ankles are so important to get things going. You all of a sudden you begin to feel all the stretching and all your ligaments all the way up into the hips and whatnot, so that's good. Twisting sideways and so forth and so on. Nice thing about it is that you can use the softness of the covers so that you can like get a little bit of resistance. You can dig into them, so you can bring elbow to knee and cross-side diagonals and whatnot by pushing into the soft surface, so that makes it kind of gives you a little bit of resistance, even more so than like say water or something like that. So I started out with that, started out with the toes and so forth, and may come up here and do something like this, and then I go into a extensor flexor routine that I've showed you before. So we pull the elbows into and pin the shoulder blades back, lift the head up, lift the tailbone up, and bring the knees into the surface. Elbows and knees are both into the surface. Then do like 2 or 3 of these, and then let that rest, and follow that by 3 or 4 flexions. Let me start out by doing forehead to hands. I drive my forehead like as if I'm going to connect my forehead and my pubic bone together, and then foreheads and knees and foreheads and feet. So you push in, down to the knees, down to the feet, so forth. Go back and forth like that. The flexion extension combination, using the soft surface to make it happen. I go through a couple rounds of those, and then I'm starting to wake up a little bit by that time, so I start doing some hand work. I spread my hands as far as possible, and I'll be turning so forth like this, here, 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 and then you can do figure eights with the hand. You're laying down here, and at the same time you can start doing cross-lateral things with your hips and arms and legs. Again, the surface is so great. You can push your elbows into the bed and pull your feet into it, or pull your knees into it, and give you that a little bit of isometric, isotonic exercise for brief moments. You're starting to wake up. I'm not even on the floor yet, and then I whip out onto the floor like so, and I go into cats and dogs, or cats and cows. Do about 10 of these, cats and cows, and now I'm doing flexor extension rapidly back and forth. Do those, and then I do sideways, look at the foot. So now I'm doing laterals. Do about 10 or so of each one. Click this way, and then hand elbow to elbow. Do about 10 again, each one, 6 to 10, whatever it feels like. And then leg raise. Again, 6 to 10 real quick ones. Boom, 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 boom. I like to snap a couple. Then I go down my elbows and just move for a little bit of hip work here. So I just do about, again, 6 to 10 each side.
And then extend the stretch, opposite sides. Pushing, reaching forward, reaching back. Lay down on the floor and do a little bit of pec work. Roll up, keep your shoulder down and your arm down. Roll up and look this way. Roll up, look this way. Pressing, pulling, stretching across the chest muscles. And roll over. And get kind of an X kind of motion here where you're kind of reach, push and reach both sides so you're getting a good walking motion in here. And then extend up a pelvic lift with a walk. Do about 10 or so of these kind of jobs. As you continue to work as extensors, reach back and do a little bit of a wrestler's kind of arch. And then wrestler's arch with foot on ropes. So forth like so. And then for the final thing, then what I usually do is another plank. I'll start out with a wide plank. That works and sets the hips a little bit. And then I'll hold for this for maybe count of 30. And then I'll move it in. And sometimes I even do a thing where I'm like this, where I actually push myself across the floor as I'm getting ready to go downstairs as the final motion. And total body workout takes about 8 minutes at the least, 5 to 8 minutes to do real quickly. Great way to start the day. Every day you know you're starting right out of the bed, so it's a great place. I mean, it's just the perfect way to get some work in before you do anything else, so you don't have to worry about later on committing to something. Touch all your nervous system bases, wake everything up, and go from there.
As happy as anything.
What was up?
We were able to see some pictures, some of your mandalas, and you haven't, is there anything you'd like to say about mandala work? Did you do this on your own, or did you, were you taught how to do it?
Well, I did it on my own. This is before art therapy.
Uh-huh.
You know, was art therapy, was before art therapy. And it was a way of following myself. It was just a way of giving myself some bearings and getting a fix on who I was and where I was after I'd had some very powerful things happen to me in my life, and that demanded reorganization of my thought process, and didn't let me barter with it.
When you would set out to do a drawing, what did you focus on?
Well, usually what I did was I focused on the center of the previous drawing.
Oh.
So I went from center to center. I would do a circle, and then I'd find the unknown in the middle of that, the core of that, and then I would expand out the next time what I thought the core of that was like. And I moved from level to level through that kind of technique, or space to space. Mm-hmm. And I did what I call helmets and shields series. Some of these drawings are part of the helmet and shield series. The very first ones. The helmets were a picture of the forehead rising up here, the illumination of the forehead, and the shields was the solar plexus area of the body. Sometimes the shield contained an image of the whole body, and with the different energy spots and different organ locations delineated through these images that I was working with. And I was in kind of an autistic environment in which I was working with symbols to describe things that I didn't have any words for, and they were my own private kind of thing. I was lost on the private sea, as they say.
Is it, one of the drawings looked like a spider in a spider web, at least through the viewfinder. Mm-hmm. Is that an accurate perception? Does it look somewhat like that?
It may look like that, right. I don't think that was ever in my mind, but it doesn't mean it doesn't look like that.
I think that's the one that I turned around again and saw from the other direction.
Right, that particular drawing is on one side, it's a picture of the surprise moment of illumination, and a picture of a person sitting in a sitting thing, and there's a lifting up into the present. I said once before that how near is the present, and I called it already. Well, how deep is the self? Well, it's the nearest. It's the already. And how fast does it show itself? It shows itself immediately, faster than words. You know, how does it catch you? It catches you by surprise.
You are in a roll today.
Yeah, it catches you by surprise.
You wanted to tell us about a dream of the swallowtail butterfly that you had recently.
Yeah. Oh yeah, this dream I had less than 2 months ago. And in this dream first of all, let me preface by saying when I was a kid I spent many, many hours hunting butterflies, as I mentioned in the earlier show, and a great part of my life was when I wasn't playing baseball and doing the other normal things that people did as young people. I was also hunting butterflies and developed a way of understanding them, and I had a sense for them, and I loved to chase them and know where they would be and how they acted. And I found that all butterflies have different characters, in my opinion, at that time anyway. And now I can look back and I use those opinions. And the most regal butterflies were obviously the tiger swallowtail, the zebra swallowtail, and the giant swallowtail. They were the ones. All the swallowtails had a certain kind of ambiance about them that was a bit status oriented, and maybe that's why they chose to be so gaudy in their way. But they all had particular ways of displaying themselves as they moved. They flew differently, and some flew in packs, and some flew alone, and were always solitary, and some flew with a pair, with a mate. And they only chose to be in certain places, like some you never saw in an open field, and some you saw only in an open field. So there's a whole different kind of look about them, and one of the ones that was always the hardest to find was the zebra swallowtail. A zebra swallowtail had a wonderful feminine quality about it. It had a regal feminine aspect to it that was like fast and sleek, and they've almost always either flew in pairs or alone. You very seldom ever saw more than one together, and you found them on the edges of woods, the wooded areas, fluttering inside the woods, so never on the edge, outside the edge, into a pasture or something, in the woods itself. And they were like sleek flyers that flew fast. If you swung at them and missed, you only got one chance, because they had great speed. And they flew kind of flat, where some other butterflies fly in a wavy sort of way. They had their particular flight pattern, and they were really quick and quite intelligent, I felt. And so this dream I had not too long ago was where I was down by my grade school in the dream, and I went into a woods in this grade school, and I saw these zebra swallowtails flying up there. I thought to myself, like, that's neat. I love zebra swallowtails. I looked at them for a while. But in the dream, let me tell you as I go on, that I had this thing where I could look at the dream, and then I would withdraw into myself and think about it, and then I would go back to the dream. Okay? But every time I went back to the dream, something new was happening. So, in this dream, I first saw these zebra swallowtails, and there was like one of them. I thought to myself, I pulled back into myself, and I thought to myself, that's neat. I like zebra swallowtails. I looked back up again. There were several of them. I pulled back into myself and said, that's unusual. There's very seldom more than one at one time. I looked back up again. There was a bunch of them. A cluster of them, all flying together. I said, this is not only is this neat, this is quite unusual, and something that is demanding me it's calling my attention to something unique happening, trying to waken me up in the dream itself, so that I wouldn't be a sleeper in this dream. I went back to the dream, and they were all lined up along a branch, all sitting there. I thought to myself, this is really bizarre. I could feel the energy and the acceleration of my being begin to lighten up, and my body began to become energized. I looked back up into the dream again, and they were all like, where they were sitting, I could see these small spirit beings sitting in the same spot, like little mists or little outlines of characters on in the same area, as if I could see their subtler bodies, if there is such a thing. I felt to myself in the dream. I pulled back into myself and wondered about this. What a wonderful thing. I looked back up at them and they all waved at me. There was about 30 of these butterfly beings all waving at me.
Oh.
And when they waved at me, I began to feel that they were doing something to me. I began to feel my inner core begin to gestate and begin to move and accelerate. I felt the excitement of anticipation come over me as you turn your head away from the cookie jar. I thought to myself, like, oh, I better get ready. I looked back up at them, and they were looking at me, and we were becoming unified in some way, and they were moving me from the inside with their thoughts, and I felt a certain kind of longing for them, and a certain feeling, and a certain respect. I thought of their character, and I felt grief over the fact that I'd hunted them as a child. And they told me by their thoughts not to worry about that. This was just what was happening. It was appropriate. And they began to accelerate me, and I began to feel my body, what they call stream. I began to stream. I began to feel the rushing up through my legs and through my inner being. I pulled back into myself as the rushing got more and more intense. I began to micro into myself. Accelerating, the excitement coming over me. And when I woke into a larger aspect of my being, as if I pulled into myself and microed, and then I expanded out to where I had whatever sense organs you have in a dream. I was looking through a window in my chest, and inside the window in my chest was a planet Earth from about several thousand miles out in space, like a big blue marble, sitting there. And I thought to myself, like, this is an excellent display, and I'm enjoying this. And that was the end of the dream.
Trying not to be envious.
I'm envious of the guy it happened to, too. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? You've heard me say that before, haven't you? Yeah.
Let's see if I'm punched now correctly. Okay.
I guess it was about 2 years ago, in the springtime, I had this dream. And it started out that we were like dismantling an old barn. And I was inside this barn. I love barns. I used to have many dreams of barns in which I'd be inside these barns. And we were dismantling this barn, and I was watching. I was kind of the foreman or somehow associated with the working crew. And there was fire flicking all over the ceiling of this big domed barn. It came up like this. I looked up there, and we took a coffee break after a while, and we went outside. We were standing there, and they had one of those coffee trucks that bring the rolls to workmen. And we're standing out there, and you know, it's a typical work scene. There's a guy standing beside me, and we're drinking some coffee. It's early spring, and the leaves are small in the trees. And you look off to the horizon, I see this great big sun up in the sky. And then just down to the right of it was the moon. No more than looked like, you know, just a little bit away. We're drinking the coffee, and I say to this guy beside me, I said, have you ever seen the sun and the moon that close together in the sky? Have you ever seen them that big before? You know, we're drinking his coffees, you know, and these plastic cups, you know, these paper cups. And he couldn't remember seeing anything like that either. All of a sudden, we saw this big ray come off, like a rocket come off the sun and strike the moon. Like it was a sperm impregnating the moon. All of a sudden, this happens, and the moon starts getting bigger and bigger. I look at him and I go like, you know, yeah, it's the dream, but like, isn't this a bit too much? You know, the production here is selling. Cecil B. DeMille must be behind us. The moon keeps getting bigger and bigger, and it crashes into the earth. There's a big explosion. We're all shaking for a second. The moon cracks open, and out of it rolls two round rocks. about 3 foot around. And it runs racing right at us. It's like it's coming right at us. I mean, like right at us. I go like this and it goes like right by. It's so heavy that it digs a great big trench in the ground. I thought to myself, like, what? I look at this guy and say, what's this? And I look back up just in time, and one rolls right up in front of me and stops right there. The other rock. It stops right smack in front of me. And I look down the tracks that these 2 tracks have made. And out of the ground where the moon is hit is rising up this purple temple that looks like it's made out of like Egyptian architecture. And someone of an archaeological buff, I kind of like immediately thought to myself that that's what it was. And instantaneous, without any doubt, without any comprehension, without any second thought, I threw my coffee cup and I said, I'll see you guys later, I'm going home. And I just jumped in elation and ran, jumping and laughing down towards this temple area. And that was a great dream, very exciting.
Yes,
Very exciting. And then we went down there and I got there and we did a bunch of stuff. But that moment of instantaneous recognition was like very pleasing. And somehow I feel maybe that this work last week, there was a tremendous flare that went off the sun last week before last. I saw a picture of it in Time magazine. It looked very similar to the one that was in that dream.
And when did you have the dream?
About 2 years ago. I've had many dreams that have come true, prophetic dreams and things have come true over the years. Not many, but certainly a handful. And I somehow think that that coming down here and whatnot has something, doing this work and setting this seed has something to do with that dream possibly. Nothing's there.
Now, is that like the third eye?
I know what the third eye concept is. It may be something similar to that.
Okay.
I think that things that are outside of the usual language are very difficult to express. I think it's analogous to the feathered headdresses of the American Indians, the head bonnets. Mm-hmm. It's analogous to the Pope's crown that hat that he wears in his official areas. It has that same kind of configuration of a flame-like opening and coolness. It's accompanied, although I've only had this happen in my life, a few moments, just a moment is plenty.
It lasts a long time.
Right, it's so very distinct, it's so very clear that just a moment is quite sufficient to fuel your thought. But one of the things that accompanies it is a cooling of the forehead. Stanley Kellerman, who is a somatic therapist in San Francisco, refers to that feeling as the idea of containment of the brain. So the brain is contained appropriately. The opposite of containment of the brain would be the idea of a hot head.
Oh, okay.
Okay. When things aren't contained well, then there's too much fluid, and the fluids in the brain are overwhelmed.
Is that a metaphor you're using?
No, I'm talking about this would be physiological fact. This is because the brain itself is the balance of the fluids in the brain depend upon the different diaphragms in the body. No, I think there's more to it than just being metaphor, even though metaphor oftentimes helps us describe that which is outside of our usual and commonplace language. Many events that happen in life are beyond the normal language, especially English. Every language has its own particular type focus, and English is very suited for describing things and objects and not very good at describing intimate experiences. So there's some problems with language itself.
So if it's not metaphor, what is he saying again?
Well, he's suggesting that the environment of the brain itself, or the balance of the pressures and fluids and hormonal balance in the brain is the result of the diaphragms and pumps that go out through our entire body.
Okay.
When things are in complete balance throughout the body, or more or less in balance, then a certain kind of containment happens in the brain when you're not threatened but yet you have the energetic quality of being interested.
Mm-hmm.
So when you bring an element of energy and containment together, as opposed to being passive, then that brings I'm sure this is a very fine edge, and I don't think there's anyone who knows particularly how to bring this about, even though there may be some individuals who have this knack.
But I get a feeling that this is somehow related to the depth of the Tai Chi experience.
Well, I think that there is the Tai Chi, one of the aspects of Tai Chi is to bring about an overall awareness, and I think that, and a balancing of the different parts of the body from the extremities in the inside out, especially in balancing of the internal organs. The diaphragms at the base of the pelvis and the top of the head, and the diaphragms at the bottom of the rib cage, those when they're too tense or too lax, depending upon the condition, create a sense of imbalance throughout the body, and something that's very difficult to correct through any kind of willful measure, but something that can be brought into some sense of harmony by a long-standing effort in the same direction.
So that maybe becomes a part of a negative feedback cycle if one is not aware of that, but the body is.
Oh, absolutely. This is there's no doubt that pulling up out of the pelvis and holding the breath and feeling pressure in the head are signs of a startle reflex that pushes throughout the body and causes the body to feel itself on alert. And by doing so, when the body's on alert, there's a immediate cutting down of information. The amount of information that's allowed in is limited because it's such an ancient aspect of the mind-body system.
You know, that seems almost paradoxical, because if the body is on alert, it seems that it would be set for more information. But do you mean bodily feedback? Is that what you mean?
Well, I mean the idea that you, when you go on alert, you begin to select out specific information.
Oh, okay. Just
so
certain things you're...
certain things you're looking for, desperate things,
Okay.
you're looking for survival mechanisms begin to pull into play.
Okay.
Not many people are involved in finer information or subtler levels of information, intuition, at the moment that someone pulls a gun on them, let's say.
Right.
Even though there are some interesting qualities of those kinds of extremely startling events that throw us into non-time and different kinds of time distortions, which have some very curious qualities about them, oftentimes can give us maybe a sense of direction of what life could be other in more normal situations.
Now, it may be a time for you to say a word about non-time, since I have a feeling for what you mean, but the viewers may not.
Well, there has been, let me think, there has been a lot of talk about hemispheric and right brain, left brain, and right brain being somewhat non-time or artistic time, or lack of any sense of progression. I think
Is it like timeless?
Timeless. Now, I think there are many degradations of this kind of thing. I think a true near-death experience, let's say, even though there's a lot of debate yet on exactly what's happening there. I mean, there's the whole, from one hand, there's people saying that this is a genuine experience of the religious structure of the universe and the religious structure of life. And then on the other hand, there are people saying, well, this is a natural mechanism of a hormonal balance changing and the different kinds of chemical changes in the brain producing a special kind of environment. So these two polarities to try to describe this irresolvable situation. Regardless of how we would try to pigeonhole it, the actual experience for the individual oftentimes includes a sense of timelessness, a sense of non-time, oftentimes, of being in a terrain in which, like, they are not governed by three-dimensional reality and three-dimensional space. There are lesser and lesser degrees of this, like when a person becomes completely involved in some kind of activity, which would be a very shallow, not necessarily shallow, I don't mean to be hierarchical, you couldn't make it into a hierarchy, but through in and out of most anyone's day, there are periods in which they move into some kind of timeless space, but there are more profound senses of timelessness that do occur in odd situations.
Those are the ones you remember.
Those are the ones that are like questions or like elements that interjected into your reality that cause a reshuffling of your information and your worldview. When something is very profound has been entered into your reality, catches you off guard, when it's truly unexpected, when it has a true element of surprise, when you could not see it coming, then at that moment something happens to your worldview, and there's no holding it back. Something happens, and there's a reshuffling around. It's just like if we looked up in the sky and we saw two suns. Well, we'd have to think about that.
Yes, we would.
We would think, well, wait a minute here. I had a dream if I went through a period in which I had dreams where I often had the sun and moon in the same sky, or two moons in the same sky, or two suns in the same sky. I went through a period of who knows why these things come. But I remember a couple times in those dreams thinking to myself, like, gosh, I don't ever remember seeing the sun and the moon that close together before. I'm puzzling over that. And I think there are some things that are so basic and taken for granted when these new elements are brought in that really are in opposition to our confirmed reality, that deep questioning goes on. And
like when you were 8 years old.
like when I was 8 years old.